Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, not talking over the reverb trails, and
Josh.
Woo! Sorry, I'm getting in trouble from talking over the reverb trails.
Yep.
Already.
Yep.
First line in. Brilliant.
Yeah, first
hey
line
mate,
in.
how are you?
Good. Good
Welcome
to be
back,
here.
sir.
Yeah, welcome back.
Loving the new space.
Like it.
It smells better.
Okay, that's not a big stretch because the last one was pretty
it's
bad.
good. It's good.
We're on a farm.
There's like a maturity happening.
Oh, let's not get silly.
we're like a semi-fine wine.
That's what I meant.
Like a box of fine wine.
For anyone who doesn't know, this is Josh Scott of JHS Pedals from
Kansas City.
Kansas City. I knew that. I did know that. Josh joined us about a year or so ago when we were in the old place, and we talked about some stuff and some things. And he's now back in the UK, and we thought, what better opportunity to... It's not a history of overdrive pedals, but it is kind of, we want to clear up some confusion. And seeing as Josh has modded, built, repaired, manufactured, studied,
Designed. All of it.
all of the above, we can ask you the obvious questions to clear up some of the
I'll try to not let you down.
We'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
Put your best foot forward this time,
I
sunshine.
will.
All right.
I'm in the game.
So it's part history lesson, but it's also part stuff like, I've got a Germanium overdrive. Why doesn't it sound like a Germanium fuzz face? What's an FET? What's a diode? What's an IC? We're going to try and go through some of those terms, and we've got some classics on the board that will help us through those discussions.
It's great.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
I'm excited. I don't have a power alley, but this is like turning almost into an alley for me. Like I love the history aspect and stuff. So it's
Cool.
fun. I think we're going into this linear talk maybe of where it heads. I think it's gonna be good. I think, and from my experience, like 11 years into this pedal company thing, this is like so important when you're just buying products. Like, what the heck's going on?
Yeah, because there's so much.
And every guitar player, let's be honest, we own like 10 to 40 overdrives, and we need to know what they do. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And the more you go along that journey,
Yeah.
the more you start asking these questions again and again, and you think you understand something back here, and you get further along, 10 years in, 20 years in. I'm still learning things every week.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, I hope that will continue today.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first question then is, why overdrive? Why do we all obsess over these overdrives? Where did they come from? Why are we so obsessed with them?
Yeah, looking at me. Okay. So I think, great subject. I think that, it's a good image to picture is like these swing bands back in the 40s. So you ever played, you've played gigs, right? You still...
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I don't mean to laugh. Yes, I've done gigs.
Okay. Sorry. And you're playing and you're killing it. And you
Killing something, but yes.
And you walk up, your wife's there, and you're like, man, that felt... And she says, like, I couldn't really hear you, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
you killed it. That was the life of a 1940s jazz guitarist in a band with horns.
Yeah, right.
Get that? It's torture.
Because it's still acoustic at that stage,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, and it's crazy to, they're like, and they're just playing, they're all over, they're amazing. You can't really hear them. The horns are super loud. So you got to amplify this. And that brings, we get the technology going here. Let's amplify it. The pickup, the guitar, the amplifier. What is the guitar amplifier? It comes from an old tube radio. So you get through this process, you start amplifying the guitar, and then as the amplifiers back then, as you turn them up more, something magical happened. And these 50s blues guys, the origin of rock and roll starts to notice you turn this valve amp up and it gets real gooey and crispy and sags. All these buzzwords we use nowadays. The origin of that, I mean, our favorite tones are still the sound of the small amp cranked. It's like beautiful. And that is overdrive. You're overdriving a tube. So all that came from a necessity of a dude just wanting his girlfriend to hear him play. That's really where this comes from.
It explains a lot.
So all of us, you're wanting your wife, you want to be noticed. That's how we get overdrive.
Straight there, from there to Tinder.
Yeah.
Like in one easy step.
No, I just... I just love the way that, you know, on day one the camera was invented. On day two they started taking pictures of naked people. It's true. It's true with guitar, isn't it? You're saying, you know, I want to impress somebody. I want to be noticed.
Yeah.
I want members of the opposite sex to enjoy this. And
Yeah, there's a human need to be louder.
Yeah.
And with the guitar, I mean, that is guitar. It's like more loud.
I wonder if that people who gravitate towards guitar have more of that in their personality, that they want. It's like, oh, guitar loud, yes, I'm in.
Yeah, maybe.
It's either that or you burn things, you know, like you're an arsonist or something. You
What
got to get it
is-
out of your system.
Yeah.
I'm glad I found a guitar. You guys glad?
Better than arson.
Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
I mean, we could write a long list, but
Yeah. Arson, guitar, very separated.
Definitely a long way apart. Okay, so we know that on the one hand, so as amplifier as amplifier design improved, you know, their goal was to go from this small thing that was overdriving so much. The guitar player turns around and says, look, I just need it louder and cleaner, because the styles of the day were about being louder and cleaner. The amps get louder and cleaner to the point where somewhere in the early mid-60s, you're getting towards 50, and then in the mid-60s, 100 watts.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the thing isn't overdriving as much as it was.
Right. Yeah. It's like, and that's facilitating the bigger venues and the loudness and the, But you end up with Hendrix taking those amps and like deafening volumes, people like that. You know, I think there's so many guys just cranking. We don't really get to hear that a lot. It's crazy. We were talking earlier about your high watt and like the amount of volume that some of these amps put out, and to get overdrive out of it. That's why you have Eric Johnson with like, I think he has hearing loss now. Like, basically, I mean, it's so loud to push those big wattages into overdrive to get it to a headroom, to run out of headroom. The higher the wattage amp, the higher headroom you can go. That's a simple way to think about overdrive. So when you're overdriving, you're breaking that headroom threshold. So 100 watt amp is crazy. Because I feel like I can play with a Princeton, you know, down under 28 watts, and it's loud.
Yeah.
So I don't envy those people in the photos holding Hendrix amps up. I mean, it's pretty crazy. 2 100 watt Marshalls.
No PA, of course, so you're playing stadium gigs and at least Royal Albert Hall.
That was it, isn't it? Because you've got the guitar isn't in the PA, so the guitar has to be heard at that stage.
It's nuts.
Was to be heard out the front,
and
that's what it was. There was no mics in front of the guitars back then.
Yeah.
There was a bit of spill into the vocal mic.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And once again, everything happy accident. You know, the fact that they started overdriving in the first place was that they just wanted to be louder, so they start overdriving.
Yeah.
They make these great big amps, they want them to be louder, and then they start overdriving, and all of a sudden we have this new thing.
So how do we get from there to here?
Yeah. I think the significant story would be the recording of a Marty Robbins song called Don't Worry. It's a Nashville recording studio. Do you know who Marty Robbins is? It's very, you know, it's just like, that's like it's this very pretty country western style pop. And there's a section in that song, Don't Worry, you can pull it up on YouTube or whatever, and all of a sudden you hear this bass guitar fuzzed out. And basically this is a broken channel in the strip, in the mixer.
Yes.
And there's a guy in the room named, his last name is Glenn Snoddy. Glenn Snoddy. He passed away last year.
Yeah.
Or this year.
Fuzz legend.
Basically, this track is recorded. You have this crooning country western pop song. Marty Robbins is like super slick and smooth, and all of a sudden, and it's just crazy fuzzy. And it works really well. There's actually like argument over, does this stay? It's so weird. And it stays, the song becomes a hit, and as you know, in this industry, your friend has a pedal, you want it. This record had a sound, and everybody wanted it.
Yeah, right.
So you have this thing in Nashville going around. So Glenn basically says, I need to control a way to do this. We need to recreate this sound. He invents a little circuit, and I believe the story goes he has a friend that works in Kalamazoo for Gibson, and they make the Maestro FZ1. The FZ1 comes out, it's like underwhelming a little bit in catalog orders, and then Satisfaction, Keith Richards. And that's literally
Because it was marketed as a way to make your guitar sound like a horn.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. Early effects, the wah pedal, the Clyde McCoy's a trumpet player.
Exactly.
Like, if you've never thought of how weird that is, like, I don't ever sit around and like, I'm dying to sound like a trumpet. But back then, that was marketed. There's some videos I've seen it make your guitar sound like a cello. I think one of the Maestros was like a cello or something. It's pretty cool. That's how that evolution kind of...
The Vox Electric Orchestra and all the trumpet players had microphones plugged into a wah.
Yes, yes, I've seen that.
And one of the guys that was had a lot to do with that. He was there at the time, and
Del Cascia,
and talking to him about that whole process, and he was the guy that said, well, because he was trying to say, look, this is for guitar. And the guy said, no, guitar's a fad. We want this for the trumpet players because it's going to replace the mute. And he says, well, if you want for trumpet players, get Clyde McCoy on board, and that's how that all came about.
Funny.
So funny.
What we need is do we know any guitar players? Les Paul, what about him? If we put his name on the guitar, maybe it will work.
There you go.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay, so
a mistake.
So now you have this Maestro fuzz tone. Rolling Stones take an American accident. It ends up in that song, and then that FZ1 is taken down to Denmark Street in London. A guy says, there's 100 versions of the story. It needs more bass, which it does. And that's what I believe that, because when you play it, it's like, this is so thin. Adds some bass, messes with it. There's a few versions of, is it a brand new creation or whatever? And the Tonebender is born. And then from the Tonebender, you end up with, you have Colorsound and Vox in the same building, literally. So there's this weird, fun relationship there. That's why you see Tonebenders under both brands. And then you have the Fuzz Face comes from the Tonebender, or the FZ1, because they're all so similar. It's like, it's just like, I don't know how to describe that. It's just a bunch of things are just happening all at once. And then the popular music, you're talking like 65-ish, I guess. I mean, that's a crazy time for music. That's like nuts. So you have this fuzz thing, it literally takes over music. The British Invasion, to me, I guess you think of the Beatles and the Rickenbackers, but really it's like the fuzzy thing, even up to Zeppelin, like 69, thinking about Tonebenders on Led Zeppelin 1. Just think about, like, I love to think about no fuzz, like no Led Zeppelin. That's pretty wild. Right. No Hendrix. So Hendrix is 66, I think, 66, 67. That's kind of cool. So an accident.
Well, let's get into that then, because... That brings us to our kind of first touch point, which is the particular style of let's call them overdrives. Let's call them all overdrives, for the sake of simplicity. What happens in that circuit is you have a couple of transistors, right?
Yeah, 2 to 3. The FZ1, it was typically 2 transistors at the start. Glen, the Glen design up to the early Tonebender MK1, MK15. Which then the Fuzz Face came from. So those are 2 transistor stages, and it's a broken audio circuit.
And those transistors are doing an amplifying job?
They're amplifying, yeah. So, a transistor is an amplifier. Like, we have a guitar amp behind us, but really it all starts with amplification within that. So a transistor was the first form of, tubes and transistors to amplify something.
So I think that's an important point to make right from the beginning, because as we come on to discuss different kinds of overdrive pedal as we go along, inside that seminal fuzz pedal design, you have an input.
Yeah.
What comes next?
You just go, it depends on the circuit, but right into amplification.
Yeah.
And usually more amplification, or then you have, like, some might have a buffer or something. They're all a little bit different, but very similar. So yeah, the transistor will be used to buffer, but mainly to amplify, depending on the very circuit you use.
And by increasing what hits those transistors, that's where you get the overdrive from?
Yeah, that can work 2 ways. That's why you have I want a pedal when I roll my volume off, it cleans up.
Yeah.
That is the evidence that more volume causes more distortion in the transistor. So when you're backing it off, your guitar actually is creating current. Like, that sounds crazy because you don't go put your finger in the wall and want current. Yeah. But actually there is a current. There's an AC signal. And so when you back it up, you're actually lowering the amount of current. Yeah.
And we will.
But you're not dying. That's the main difference there. It's not like a electrical current. Yeah.
We'll come back to this in a second, but I just want to mention it now. And those transistors, particularly in the case of the fuzz faces, which is what we're going to listen to.
Yeah.
The big discussion about transistors in fuzz faces and pedals of that generation are germanium or silicon. And we just want to draw the distinction right now between
It's a good point, yeah.
A germanium and silicon transistor or a germanium diode, which we'll
that's
get
a big confusing point. It's huge, the amount of emails we get and stuff. Yeah.
We'll come back to that. Okay, let's hear a fuzz face. This one isn't sounding right today.
Okay, you plug your Strat in because
some it's not quite right with it. I don't think. Definitely sounds a bit weird.
That could be good though.
could be great.
So this is what is this? This is a modern remake of a fuzz face, and this is the Eric Johnson signature, which means it's a silicon. It uses silicon transistors. Best way to set the fuzz face is like this.
So this would be replicating like very late '60s, early '70s. Supposedly Hendrix loved, he it kind of hit that era of when his career ended. Yep.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
Something not 100% right with it. But anyway, so as Josh was saying, you turn the volume down and it cleans up real nice. The germanium transistor ones that I played tend to clean up a little better than that. So one technical question I got for you now is, it's said that EJ likes his transistors biased quite high.
Okay.
So it sounds spittier?
Yes. So I guess what the meaning there would be, so one, we were going back, let's see how to say this, going back to more input signal from your guitar will distort it, right? More voltage from the power supply or the battery will clean it up. So as your battery, like dying battery sounds better, that can't be a fact. It just sounds different. I might hate it, you might love it. Dying battery is lowering the voltage to the transistors and giving it less headroom as though it was a lower wattage amp. So think about a 9-volt battery would be the highest headroom of a 9-volt pedal. Does that make sense? If your battery's dying down to 5 volts, your 9-volt pedal becomes a 5-volt pedal, just like a 100-watt amp would become a 50. It's the same exact thing. So your headroom, you actually have a span and a sound wave. And if I hit my guitar hard enough, I might actually create more than 9 volts of current clipping the 9-volt. If it goes down to 5, it's a lot easier to clip 5. It's the same exact principle.
So that's the way you do it. You just give the transistors less voltage.
Yeah, that's why some, like, my pollinator is a fuzz face thing, or a Tonebender. You'll see a ton of these that they have a bias knob, and that's what that's doing, is it's adjusting the voltage of the power supply to the transistor.
And there's a range that all these transistors work within.
They have to operate. Exactly. They won't even turn on.
Yeah.
And a lot of your crazy fuzzes, like, there's some really cool stuff. I can't think of the names, but, glitchy, crazy, weirdo fuzzes. A lot of those, that's the secret to designing in that field, is you're glitching it out. You're getting it right on the line you're talking about. And it, like, the circuit doesn't even want to turn on, and that's when it sounds really cool.
So is that when they gate, or is that a different thing again?
It's the gating. Yeah. Less power, more gate.
If you imagine that when the transistor, basically, that lets the current flow, and
the
that's the switch,
Yeah.
exactly. And that's like the gate. If you're on the border, right on that line,
Wigs out.
exactly, some dynamics of the signal will let that gate open, then some, if it's just, will let it shut, and then you get this really farty, and it can sound, because you end up with this signal that's sort of almost square wave, and it can sound so aggressive.
It's like the audio version of an overhead fluorescent light going out.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the flickering, like, madness of the light, but you're hearing it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Flickering madness.
Flickering pedal name, band name.
Okay, so that's the fuzz face, and as you said, the fuzz face sits within that absolutely first generation defined the sound of that mid to late 60s.
Mid-late 60s, bread and butter.
And
Very
that is,
important.
That super simple circuit, 2 transistors and however many resistors.
It's so minimal.
Yeah. Super simple. Okay, so we've got another example of that type of circuit, the power boost, which Dan and I are big fans of.
That's a great pedal.
So so this is commonly hailed as the first overdrive pedal. So when we get to, because again, it's we're using silicon transistors, but we have EQ, so we have a tone stack in there.
Yes.
So they've taken a similar tone stack to what you might have. It's a bass and treble, so it's a back and door circuit, same as you'd have an amplifier.
Like a blackface amp, probably.
Yep.
Like a Princeton. It's probably very similar to a Princeton.
Right, and they've popped that in with a single volume control. So like on the Fuzz Face, we've got the amount of fuzz, so the amount of distortion that the circuit's creating. But on the power boost, they had a single volume control, and it's designed in a way that's so clean up to a point.
Yeah. It's like amazingly clean and a boost. And then at 95%, it's like
just loses
chaos.
Yeah.
Which is cool. Yeah.
Okay.
So again, just before we hear it, and I'll just mention that these aren't the only cornerstones of overdrive pedal.
Sure.
Yeah, there's just
history.
examples.
These are just examples. So
Yeah.
if anyone's going, oh, you really should have included this, maybe.
Yeah.
These are the ones we had to hand.
So this Colorsound, this is early mid 70s. The Batman onomatopoeia look there, and that. I think it's fair to say, like you said, this is one of the first overdrives.
Yeah.
And
but we're
definitely.
still dealing with...
Not that you couldn't take a Fuzz Face and just back it down and
make turn
Right.
and call that
Yeah,
an
or,
overdrive.
that's something that's easy to get hung up on for people. Is like just because
Overdrive,
something's a
distortion,
fuzz.
yes.
You could go on that. That's a whole
some
episode.
of the best clean sounds ever.
Or
Fuzz
distortion
Face
pedals turned down
into a plexi guitar turned down. But so we're still dealing with the same basic kind of circuit. So we've got transistors doing the amplification. We've got nothing in here doing clipping at this point, have we?
No, this
We'll come
is
on to
3
that in a sec.
transistors.
It's 3, is it? Okay.
Which allows more headroom in a way. So different things happen because of that.
Just to explain what we've got happening here.
Yeah.
Because this power boost doesn't have a master volume, we've got it going through this
That's right.
Dunlop volume pedal, which gives it a master
It's
volume.
like imagine your favorite drive or distortion pedal would know it's the volume's all the way up all the time. That's what's happening here.
Exactly.
So you're having to we don't want to die.
So
Okay,
here
so
we go
Nick-
then, Dan. Your turn to play.
Okay. Right, so. And the power booster.
That's great. It makes everything big.
That is minimum
But
volume.
that's the minimum volume on the power booster. That's turned down as low as it will go. So just one more time, sorry. This is the guitar straight to the amps. Minimum on the power booster.
So amazingly loud. Like we were talking. So this is like David Gilmour. Like Wish You Were Here.
Yeah.
It's 100-watt high watts and 100-watt super reverb, and this. And when you listen to you're in your car and you're listening to Shine On You Crazy Diamond and you hear this it's like whisper quiet. It's his tone's amazing, but in reality the room was unbearable. It's like this crazy, It's amazing. I wish people could be sitting here. It's like my back has indentions on it. What are we at? We're at 10-20%.
I've turned it up. I was watching the input levels on the audio interface there, so I've turned it up as much as I can before we blow our mics out. So what we'll do now is we'll turn the master volume down using this.
It's awesome. It's awesome. It's awesome because it's so raw.
Man.
It's just like it's like opening a hornet's nest of loudness. It's awesome.
What I love about Dan knew about these, and you obviously knew about these. I didn't know about this particular slice of overdrive pedal history until a few weeks ago. What amazes me is that even in like early 70s, you pretty much had most of it right there. You could go from that clean boost all the way through to really lovely fizzy.
It was a real moment for us because we're thinking, if this is the first overdrive pedal, and we had the high watts going, and it was like easily one of the best sounds we've ever had. We're thinking, where has it moved on from here? Because it just doesn't get any better, for that sort of thing. There's definitely there's a sharpness to the edges as it clips, but it gives it that attack.
Yeah,
it's incredible.
That's cool. I'm a super fan of it.
So does the Big Muff fall into this category there as well, or are we talking about something different there?
So the Big Muff is even more. So the first Big Muff, 6869 triangle, transistor fuzz, silicon. We have an opamp one here. That's later. But yeah, so Big Muff is a further relative of the original fuzz. I mean, it's getting more and more intricate. Different parts, different things are happening, and yeah, it's fuzz. Yeah, it's so transistor fuzz.
Let's move along to that in a sec. I just wanted to see if it was in the same category because
I think so.
It's easy for all of us to say, yeah, I really like, and then you just trot out a bunch of stuff. I like an FET overdrive, or I like silicon transistor fuzz, and just with the example of those two things there, they are able to sound so radically different.
They are. In that thought or philosophy, I would have to put the Big Muff more distortion.
Yeah,
sure.
If you're gonna go in for someone trying to figure out pedals, you don't plug in a Big Muff and sound like the Yardbirds. You're gonna have a short career. You won't even get free beer or anything for that gig, But it is a fuzz. I think the original marketing of the Big Muff was distortion fuzz.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have one on the board. Just want to do a quick tangent about treble boosters, because as I understand it, the treble boost circuit is not that different from a fuzz circuit.
It's super. Yeah, it's a Germanium amplifier. The original Dallas Rangemaster, same era. It's like the heavens opened and like pedals started raining down in this era. It was really important. But 65, 64, 65, 66.
Mm-hmm. Same thing, a transistor doing amplification, but across
a single
transistor.
The treble booster circuit is so small. It's amazing. It's amazing how there's nothing there. It's pretty much the bare minimum of what the device, like you said, needs to switch on.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's magical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about the treble boosters is, like, for me, because the circuit is so simple and so pure, that's when you really hear the difference, certainly in relation to what you're playing, between the transistors. So you can get, like, some of the OC71 transistors, and the NKT transistors.
Yes.
And as long as they're within their the bias range and they're operating properly, and the difference, it can be phenomenal between them.
Yeah. The smaller the circuit, the more important each part.
Sure.
The larger the circuit, the more negligible a part is. And that's really important to know because it's like if you're I can't cook. I can do like frozen pizza. It's pretty good too. But if you're cooking and you're making a soup, let's just say soup. This is going to go downhill. My analogy's falling apart. But you're making a soup from a can. You're making a soup
from a can.
And let's just say it's like the straight broth or like the chicken stock.
Okay.
And you put one spice in, that spice matters. You put 25 in, you don't even know what's in it. And circuitry can have that same feeling of like the bigger the circuit, like a Big Muff circuit compared to a Rangemaster is like
massive.
It's massive. Yeah. So that's where certain things start to not matter as much. That's why fuzzes are just so... The simplicity of the way that it works is in part why it feels so intuitive to your hand.
Yeah.
I mean, everything matters. It's literally such a small circuit that even a click here, or like your pickups really start to matter a ton.
Yeah.
If I'm playing through a dual rectifier, do the pickups really matter?
Sure.
Someone's yelling at me, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
it matters
yeah,
more if
of
you're
course.
A question of degree.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a degree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Okay, so we've got this far then.
we're doing good.
We're okay.
we're doing
You're the
pretty
best
well.
moderator I've ever worked with. I mean that.
Okay, so we'll group those together, and what are we going to call them? Are we going to call them transistor overdrives? Are we going to call them fuzz pedals? Because I think that whole question of what stuff is called is another massive source of confusion for everybody.
It is. I think it's just what it is. It's fuzz. It's a fuzz circuit. The Colorsound thing makes this departure from that. Maybe it's discrete over. Well, that's even hard. It gets into, I guess, discrete overdrives, meaning transistor-based overdrives.
Yeah.
And-
Okay.
Because that's where the valley of decision happens. There's something coming up in our timeline that it's the big deal of like transistors versus a new technology.
But the other thing is, it's where you're operating them in relation to the range that they operate in. So,
Yes.
a power booster doesn't just sound like a power booster. It's that you've got this, with turned down, it's just this big, beautiful, clean,
Beautiful.
open thing. Turned up, it's this, and when you change the EQ controls, it can be smooth, it can be brittle. So there's
That one pedal will
Exactly.
probably do treble boost to fuzz face very well,
Yeah.
convincingly in
Yeah.
a band.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you were hinting at a big move in technology. Are we about to dive into that, or have we got something else to look at first?
Let's say germanium transistors versus silicon. Going back to that, that's where I think we're at, actually.
Yeah.
I got ahead of myself.
we're all excited.
I got so excited.
It's-
Yeah. So germanium transistors are called germanium because the material they're made of is germanium, like type of semiconductor. Those are the very first types of amplifier devices like that. You hear, a song like Brown Eyed Girl, transistor radio stuff. It's very significant what these did for technology. They're very unstable. You have stories like Dwayne Allman putting his fuzz in the freezer sounding better. It definitely sounded different. The temperature of a germanium changes the gain structure within the germanium. So that's pretty crazy. You have Hendrix playing on the stage at Woodstock and playing inside of Bag of Nails in London. His fuzz would have significantly sounded different. How much different, I don't know. I've had artists, an early fuzz pedal of mine, called me from a festival in Virginia. It was 110 degrees, and it was just gating constantly because it got so hot, just sitting out in the sun. So what happens is there's a desire in technology. We have to also remember guitar pedals aren't necessarily driving the market of technology. That's something that's forgotten.
That's a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
point.
Like, if
That
it
is a
comes
great
down
point.
to furthering medical research through technology, or does your overdrive have something new, we don't get the call. We're using the parts that are made for other
Sure,
things.
yeah.
That is super important because it's amazing how unobvious that is. So
valves are a great example, I guess.
it's great. So technology said we need something better than a germanium, and there's probably some fascinating stories like people literally dying because a transistor got hot and something shut down. Who knows?
Yeah.
So silicon transistors are made, and they're super consistent and super stable. One you might take, at JHS there's a shelve unit. It probably has 10,000 AC 128s on it. When we're doing pollinators or tonebenders, we use those. We go through and measure each one, put them in buckets with numbers. And it's like some of them we'll just never use because they don't meet the range. With a silicon, you order the part, and the tolerance to each other very close. You could almost pop and play and not worry about it. And that's what that did for technology.
And so that's just another point of the germanium ones. These germanium transistors are being made at exactly the same time because
Yes.
the nature of germanium, as they come off the line, the one will measure have one range, and the one next to it will be completely different.
Yeah, like one will have a gain of say 60,
Yep.
and then you do another one, it's like 80.
Yeah.
And the sound of that means the 80 one has more headroom. You could see it in that way, and 60 will sound different. And that's why you end up seeing a lot of you guys seeing forum discussions or videos like Eric Johnson with his umpteen million fuzz faces. They do sound different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's where that comes from.
Sorry.
My job is to state the bleeding obvious. Germanium and silicon are elements, and if you look at the periodic table, you can see them there in on the periodic table.
See,
So,
I never went to school, and that's not my job to talk about that stuff.
but it's, you know, sometimes
true.
you just get this light bulb moment of oh yeah, of course that's what it is. That's what it is. And I remember somebody telling me that once. Josh also mentioned AC128, which was a germanium transistor that was used in a lot of the early Dallas Arbiter fuzz faces. Just to clear that up.
Yeah, and there's tons, and guys like Analog Man, their sites are like, you know, that is, he's so far in the knowledge base of a guy like him.
Yeah.
I don't even want to try.
See, it's really interesting. We spent some time with Analog Man in the States last year, and because we were talking about before, because the circuit is so simple, and we're saying everything matters, and it comes down to, you know, he can tell you the different the resistor, not just the values, but what the resistors are made of, and the different sort of capacitors and everything in that circuit, because he knows that circuit so well. And, you know, we had 20 fuzzes to sit down and choose from and play, and it's like plugging into each of them going, and they all have a similar thing. They're all fuzzes, but it's like everyone had its own character. Absolutely amazing.
It's super true. And like an Analog Man, he's done this so much. I mean, he would be, if I need to, he's the expert. I mean, stuff I've read and seen, I mean, he will know literally what resistor to put on the emitter of this transistor to make it. I mean, every little, it's insane amount of knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's why fuzz is this rabbit hole. If you fall in love with fuzz, you're done. Like if you'll start, it's crazy.
Well, as soon as we switched the fuzz face on there, I was like, yeah, it doesn't sound quite right. Something's not right with it. And I want to ask it if it's happy, because you treat them like living things, because they are, I guess.
And that's so this silicon boost. Boost. Yeah, just a FET boost. Yep.
FET, you said FET, field effect transistor.
Yeah.
How is that different from whatever transistors we were just talking about?
I think knowing that completely, I think it's just a different form of a silicon transistor. Different pinouts, meaning they're meant for different purposes. Some things we use for audio are actually just made to switch things on and off. So yeah, I don't know to a player that is something to get super hung up on. I would say when you think of things like a FET boost, like that's a great example. That's a good one to buy if you're curious, the Bad Bob. The other thing would be like a ZVEX SHO. You're looking at, you know, something totally different. You know, the BS170 is not that same transistor. And you'll actually hear a difference in how that responds. And again, it's a rabbit hole. It's too much information.
Dan and I will do a video on boosts. We're sort of due one. So just before we hear the Bad Bob, FET, JFET, MOSFET.
Yeah.
The JFET and the MOSFET are two different types of FET, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and they'll respond and feel different. Just like a one tube will sound different than they're tubes. They're doing the tube thing. And there's something, you know.
Yeah.
It's a sonic difference, and it helps a designer go, this spec is what I need. That's the purpose of it.
And where is it relevant in the circuit? Because I've heard of pedals that, so for example, this is a FET boost, and then I hear of other pedals that have got an FET input stage or an FET output stage, or
even effects loops. And you get into crazy amounts of
and the FET circuit in the Overdrive Special.
Yes,
you know, on the dumbbells as well.
Big deal.
Yeah. Okay,
so it can exist on its own, which is what's happening here.
Yeah.
Or it can exist as part of another circuit in something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, if anyone out there, you own 20 pedals, you probably have these terms in your circuits now, and it doesn't even matter that you know it. You know, like certain buffer types are always on with your drive. When you turn your drive on, you're not worried if it's buffering, but it's helping it sound a certain way. Like a tube screamer has an input buffer. We don't care what it is. We just want it to sound good. It's a different need of the part.
I guess that's where I was driving with that question, because you start reading things that say things like, I like FET pedals, and it's like, well, where is that FET used and how is it used?
Yeah.
And how does it interact with everything else? And
sure.
My thing there, and I say this a lot, is that kind of comment is really hard, because any part of any type, germanium, silicon, FET, MOSFET, if someone designs a good sounding circuit around the
that
part, it will sound good.
Yeah.
Take a very good well-designed germanium fuzz, pop the wrong part in there, and it's not it doesn't matter what the part is. Is the part being used in the way it needs to be used? It's the design is more important than the part. That's what I'll say.
Right.
You go buy like a crazy whatever, hot pedal of the day, and everybody wants it because it has some rare part. If the circuit isn't a good circuit, it doesn't matter. I'd rather have a crappy part with a great circuit. That's what matters. Yeah.
Nice.
People are yelling at me.
Ace. No. I was really hoping you would get to that.
You're trying to get me beat up. I can feel.
Well, let's hear the bad bulb.
So, Josh, it's your turn to play.
Really?
Yeah.
Sorry, people.
Mike's going to be so happy about this.
That's cool because it's giving a ton of volume. These amps are high headroom. It's a great sound.
Yeah, and
that has a more better. I like that. A lot of pedals are they're just more. It makes everything that I like. Everything I played this earlier. This guitar still sounds like this guitar. The amps still sound the same, but it's just bigger and nicer.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's, and as I said, Dan and I will do a follow-up video on some boosts and get into that in a bit more detail. But you can hear the bad bob on quite a few TPS episodes.
Right.
So now we're going to talk about
step change.
Op-amps, are we?
Yeah. The next evolution of technology is somewhere along the lines. People want more consistency than silicon transistors. They're needing more controlled environment for circuit design, things that aren't pedals. Once again, this part we're about to discuss changed pedals forever, but it's not a pedal part. And so let's say the TL071 is a good place to start. I believe that's probably, somebody might correct me, it doesn't really matter, but that's a very primitive single stage op amp. So that is one amplifier in an 8-leg package. So it's little chips. We get, that's an internet topic there, chips.
Okay,
I gotta have the right chip.
We'll put some images on screen of what and this will happen at this point. This is a germanium transistor.
Right.
This is a silicon transistor. I don't know what an FET looks like.
Very similar.
Okay, so there'll be an FET as well, and this is an op amp, which you see looks quite different.
Yeah. So say a TL071, and this allows something really cool to happen. So as we saw with the transistor models, like specifically when we got to the power boost, it has more transistors in it to give it a more stable design is what they're going for. A combined relationship of multiple transistors results in a more stable circuit. One transistor, fewer parts, means it's more sensitive. That's good, but it can also be bad. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what happens with the op amp is if you could see inside of this little chip, every time I say chip, I get hungry. It's fine. If you could see inside of this chip, it is actually, it's called an IC because it's an integrated circuit. The chip itself, it's almost like this matrix moment. It's actually a whole other circuit. It's like some of them have tons of transistors in them. It's like you're going like down this whole, like, it's pretty crazy. And that technology is massive. And what happens is you end up with this operational amplifier, an integrated circuit that has 8 legs, and you pop it in and it has an input and an out and a ground. And then you have this ability to amplify super consistently, super stable. And then we have things come along like DOD 250, overdrive preamp, Distortion Plus, almost the same circuit, different clipping. We'll get to that later. And my favorite of that kind of era, I use a different chip, it doesn't matter, the RAT, you could say.
Okay.
And what we have here is you take a circuit and you amplify the sound with the operational amplifier, super clean, that's the beauty of the op amp, is it can be super clean. It doesn't want to distort. It has a great headroom. It has a great ability to take more voltage and stay clean. But then if you put diodes, clamps, and you clamp down the signal of the output, you create drive and distortion that way. You take your beautiful, clean, loud thing, and you take, instead of the wildness of a transistor, you actually create this beautiful, huge, clean sound and clamp it down at the end the way you want to with the specific diode. And that is diodes. Diodes are a pedal rabbit hole too.
So we've introduced another bit to the circuit now.
It's like a different, the circuits are becoming different because technologies are becoming different. And so DOD 250 Distortion Plus can't be forgotten. It's huge what those did. Leads in the RAT, Kalamazoo as well. Hard clipping becomes kind of the next stage. Take an op amp and hard clip it.
Definitely going to ask you about hard and soft clipping in a minute and diodes, but just to make that point again, in the first generation of stuff we were talking about, you had transistors that both did the amplification and created the distortion.
Yes, and the more they amplified, the more they distorted. And that's where the operational amplifier kind of alleviates some of this problem.
So now we're getting to the stage where we've got something creating the amplification, but something else that's clipping it to give you distortion.
Yeah, to clip the waveform.
RAT, Dan, I think you should play this because this is your favorite RAT, right?
This is my favorite RAT.
It's so good. RAT's one of my favorite pedals ever. It's so good.
That filter, is that just a low pass filter or is it doing something else?
It's so tweak the range. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I did a bit of a go at that.
When it's at full bright, it's basically nothing's happening. As you turn it, the darker it gets, it's taking high end and dumping it off to ground.
Yeah.
So it's like by high end, it's throwing your high end away.
Because I'm sure that in the later RAT, the smaller one that I had, it had more of almost like more of a filtery sound. It almost sounded like it was doing something in the mid range as well. So I don't know if that changed over the years, but
depending on where your so you've got the capacitor, which is basically doing the job. It's a tone control here.
Yeah,
depending on the value of that capacitor, it says how far down that frequency is going to reach and how much of that is being rolled into ground.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now it seems like we veered into what I would think of as distortion pedal territory.
Yeah.
Is it a good time to talk about when do we say fuzz, when do we say distortion, when do we say overdrive?
Interesting.
What do they mean?
The RAT's a really good. The RAT does all three.
Yeah.
It's wild to listen to something like, there's so many grunge records or even metal, like certain genres, super heavy, sludgy RAT. David Gilmour gets into the RAT. You end up with this beautiful, or then like the first Coldplay records. He has the drive turned down and it's like this light overdrive. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
So how do you make a definitive statement?
So are we saying boost?
The RAT is this. Well,
are we saying that they are gain levels? So boost isn't much, overdrive's a bit more, distortion is more, and fuzz is the most? Or are we saying there's something else?
I think I would have to say how much it affects the original waveform, maybe, or something like that. It's really hard. It kind of falls into the argument of this is a country guitar.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what happens with the RAT or something. It's difficult because everyone remembers it a certain way or plays a certain style.
So you mentioned the waveform. Could we talk about clipping at this point then? Because if we go from, you use the term hard clipping.
Hard clipping. Yeah.
Which presumably to me means a squarer type of waveform that you end up with. Mm-hmm. Let's get into that. So I'm sorry, I am absolutely pushing this discussion.
It's great
towards the answers I want to hear. So if you want to, if you
want a different, just call in.
Yeah, just call in.
What's the number?
Or ask a different question. Because we've all looked at these diagrams, right? We've all been on the Boss website or read the Boss book, and it shows you the OD1 and the FZ.
Or just like Google image diode clipping, and I mean, you can spend all day. There's so much information.
So hard clipping, soft clipping. Let's start there.
Yeah. So you have hard clipping is what we just talked about. The invention of the op-amp comes along. Things like the DoD 250, Distortion Plus, and RAT. It's my favorite 3 hard clippers. The Klon's actually a hard clipper. That just messed with my brain. I'm going to stay on subject. I'm in the 70s. That's where I am.
Yeah.
Let's stay in the 70s. So basically, you put diodes on the output of a circuit. One end of the diode is in the circuit path, and one is to ground. And as the signal passes by, it just like the RAT tone control throws away high end, this signal is going in and being clipped off to ground. It's a very similar process, the way the current flows through the circuit. And it's hard clipping the waveform. It's pretty much what it says it is. And then you have soft clipping, late 70s, specifically, 77, you have the Boss OD1 comes along. Then the Tube Screamer right after it is basically a modified OD1. And that is the first time anyone takes the diodes off the output of the circuit. So the signal's not purely passing through and being dumped fully. It's inside the feedback loop of a dual op-amp. So your clean signal's moving, and in the loop of the op-amp, you're clipping off signal, and it allows certain aspects of your actual guitar signal to stay untouched. And it's this beautiful world opens up. I mean, and now you've got your blues breakers, or like My Morning Glory, or the King of Tone.
Yeah.
You've got, it's in so many great soft clippings. I love soft clipping too. It forever changed everything. The Timmy, just great pedals that soft clipping, late 70s. And I think that's what most people full drives. And there's so many Tube Screamer variants for a reason, because it's really pleasant. It reacts more like, when we think of a Tube Screamer, we think of Stevie Ray Vaughan, Overdrive, It's hard to call a TS9 or a Tube Screamer TS808 a distortion, because it's soft. But it's no problem calling a RAT distortion, because it'll clip the junk out of it will.
That's kind of where I was going with that, because in my brain, Overdrive has always been that softer.
Right. And that can be confusing to people when they pick up a Colorsound. The American version of this was the Colorsound Overdriver.
Yeah. And
you were saying, I never heard that. They didn't like the color.
So it's the Overdriver is exactly the same circuit, but the US market didn't like the orange. It was too gaudy. So they painted it black and called it the Overdriver, but it is
it's the same exact circuit. Yeah. And so that can be confusing, because you have this thing called the Colorsound Overdriver back in the day, when technically it did distortion.
Right.
There's a lot of gray lines being crossed, and I don't know if I even know what's going on at this point in the conversation. I think we're doing a decent job.
We are doing a decent job, because we've got to op amps, and then something used to clip that, and perhaps the comparison that we should draw is.
And you can just straight up clip the op amp alone, clipping the rails of the op amp. That's a whole other thing.
And what kind of pedal would do that?
I think, if you take common mod that people do, take a RAT, remove the diodes, or a DS1. There's all these, you'll see the DIY take pliers and clip the diodes out. What that does is it removes that clipping at the end. There's so much I want to say. It removes the clipping at the end, and then the pedal has nothing holding it back. It becomes super loud.
Yeah.
The clipping actually makes things quieter. And then so you end up with the ability to just keep cranking the loudness, and it just basically you start hearing the op amp finally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's breaking how that's intended to be used.
This morning, Dan and I did a pick and mix with your new AT Plus, the Andy Timmons Plus, and that's got like the ATs before, it has the switch on, and that's what that switch is doing. Clipping.
It's like the headroom wattage. We're simulating 25 watts, 50 watts, or 100 watts, and we're doing that with different headroom diodes.
Right.
So every diode, this is just to go here real quick, when we're talking about clipping, whether it's in a feedback loop or on the output hard clipping, soft or hard, you hear people, most of your crowd has had to have heard of like LED clipping or germanium clipping or whatever. So you end up, every diode has a certain point. Let's say 1 to 10. Let's not get like super technical, but one diode might clip at 1. That would be like a germanium. It clips really quickly and it makes more distortion. An LED is cool. Like, remember like Robert Keeley's Seeing Eye Mod?
Yep.
It looks cool, but it also feels big because that LED lets more signal go before it clips. So it might be a 7 on that scale.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, the diodes all have a different headroom themselves.
The other interesting thing about the diodes is if you imagine you've got your waveform and your waveform is passing through 0, so you've got this AC circuit, and the diodes are clipping both sides of the waveform.
Yeah.
Then you get into asymmetrical clipping where you can use different diodes on either side of the waveform, so it'll clip differently. So it's really
You can just keep going.
It's amazing.
Like a blues breaker has 4 symmetrical silicon diodes, and a tube screamer, there's so many variants on that. A RAT has 2 symmetrical. Then a lot of mods will be to make it asymmetrical.
Yeah.
Take a tube screamer and add one more weird diode alongside another one, and all of a sudden you have the feeling more like a tube amp.
Right.
It's like, it's not so perfectly level. The clipping feels like, literally, it's a little off. It feels more natural. It feels like something's responding to you differently.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like something else we should get into.
Absolutely.
We're up to like 6 new episodes.
Yeah.
From the,
We are. Well, I think
It's big questions, though, and it's important because this is for so many players. This is the foundation of their tone, and I think getting a really good understanding of this is so helpful.
Well, it is until you disappear down the rabbit hole and you decide you like one thing, and then actually just changing one other thing in that circuit can make all the difference in the world. So trying to understand the difference between this thing and that thing is...
It's
You
massive.
can just drive yourself crazy because then you get something else that's supposed to be like that and it doesn't sound like it at all. So
True.
That's what I wanted to come out of this video was don't get so het up on reading about the technology side of it and what kind of circuit it is. It can be helpful and it's a good start place, but it's not going to tell you what the thing sounds like.
I have an analogy.
Yeah.
I wanted an SG Junior for the longest time, and I saw a guy selling one on eBay, and I bought it sight unseen, and it was an absolute pig, right? But that was the guitar I wanted, but when I got it, it was like, no, this isn't it. And you think, well, that's the guitar I want, but no, what I wanted was a different guitar that would have those characteristics. But until now, I won't buy a guitar unless I play it first. A Telecaster isn't a Telecaster. Thinking that I like an FET booster that's got all this stuff on it, just plug in and play, and if you like it, you like it, and that's it.
The variables are maddening.
I mean, absolutely.
I think us three, I don't even really know what your rigs are, what you like, but like I'm a bassman guy, or Sovtek MIG-50, something 6L 650 watts.
That's another question.
I use like a blues brick, like my Morning Glory and a Klon, and I usually play Jazz Masters or Tellies, and if I go advise you, it just doesn't work. And you end up like, if you like guitar, I say this all the time on my show, it's like you just need to remember to have fun. Like, go play guitar. If your pedal sounds good and you like it, just play the pedal. If you're not finding some joy out of this process, maybe sell that pedal.
Like, let that be $8,000 later.
I love the memes that are like, despite Jimi Hendrix non-true bypass pedals and horrible cables,
people still
he had
enjoyed
a decent gig. It's like, and
absolutely.
I'm saying this like I make a living because people, I get it, and it does matter. Quality matters, and these things, and exploration of circuits and offering new ideas, but don't let it keep you from like the point of guitar.
The quality and the components aren't necessarily the factors of whether you're going to enjoy that sound or not.
At all. I hate a lot of expensive things.
Can I digress for 1 second?
Why not?
I had a MIG-50 back in the day, and it was my favorite amplifier.
MIG-50, okay.
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
Right. And I had to get rid of it because I was moving overseas. And you're the only other person I've ever seen.
I'm going to give you one of mine. I have 6.
What?
I got out of hand. I don't want to talk about it. I'll send you one.
Are you kidding me?
I'm dead serious.
Oh my, oh man.
I love the MIG-50. I have the MIG-30s. I have a bunch of. I have to talk about that later. That's like
Man, okay,
there's so
so-
many cool things in that lineage of this weird Mike Matthews experiment in the 90s. But
Branded Sovtek, I believe, were they?
yeah,
Yeah,
Sovtek
yeah.
made in Russia.
Yeah.
But the MIG-50, I plug in input 2.
Right.
And I put every knob basically at noon, put my volume where I need it. I've never heard a better pedal platform. It's just
Man,
there's
that's
no
amazing.
fuss, no fuss.
Oh.
Any
Yeah,
cabinet.
yeah.
I've yet to find a cat. Any
That
The
part.
tangential question there is what makes a good pedal platform output. Do not answer because
episode
we need to...
7.
Oh man, thank you. I mean, that's unbelievable.
No,
Thank you so much.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
I kept saying no to getting other ones that were offered, and it's just out of hand. So I'm going to sell some. I'll send you one. It'll look good here.
We can figure out some sort
I'll
of
put a sticker on my
fair
face on
trade,
it.
I think.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, we'll work it out.
Awesome. Okay, so let's
hear some. Let's hear some.
We've been talking about operational amplifiers, integrated
Yes.
circuits, same thing.
Hard clipping rat,
Yeah, hard clipping Klon.
which, by the way, you don't hear the clipping of the Klon at all if you use it as a clean boost. Thus, the argument of the important diode doesn't matter. If you're using a Klon or a Klon replica as a clean boost,
It
the
makes no
part that's
difference.
supposedly sacred isn't being heard. Let that sink in. Let's move on.
The sacred part is a germanium diode, and I think it's important to say at this point that a germanium
Yeah,
diode,
it
which
is.
is clipping, is not the same as a germanium transistor. So
That's
when,
a huge confusion.
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
someone says, "Oh, I've got a germanium pedal and that's what I really like," hang on, my germanium this doesn't sound like my germanium that. What they might
Yeah.
be saying is my germanium clipping overdrive doesn't sound like my germanium fuzz face. Well, of course it doesn't, because the germanium fuzz face uses germanium transistors for amplification. The germanium clipping overdrive uses germanium
Yeah.
diodes for clipping.
clipping. Yeah,
Germanium diodes are little glass. They're
Mm-hmm.
usually glass package. They physically break, and it is not amplifying anything. It's clipping it off, and it does it in a way it clips more off, so it has a certain sound compared to like an LED or a 1 in 916 in a tube screamer or something. And that's important to know because, like you said, I get countless emails, or you'll see people in comment sections. It's confusing when you say, I only like something germanium.
Yeah.
Once
Yeah,
again, that's a hard thing to step into.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated because a germanium fuzz transistor has nothing to do with a germanium clipping diode.
Yeah.
It is so far apart.
Do you get the
Awesome.
question, can I use my germanium clipping overdrive, whatever it might be, in hot conditions? Do you get that
Yes.
question?
Oh, yes. Or should I put my germanium clipping overdrive first in my pedal chain because
the one.
germanium fuzzes go first.
That's the question.
And
None
they're not even related.
of these are stupid questions, by the way. The only
They're
stupid
not,
questions
no.
are the ones you don't ask, but hopefully this answers
Yeah.
answers them.
That's a fantastic subject.
Groovy. Right, so
So your tube screamer won't sound better in the fridge.
No.
Okay. Or your Klon even.
No.
Or your modded tube screamer.
No.
Sorry.
No.
my Klon's cool enough. Thank you very much. Okay, so
Come on, let's hear some TS9.
where
On
this
Max
is-
on,
the
sorry.
Superbolt doesn't sit there. This is
The Superbolt is
three-
a discrete all transistor overdrive. So
Let's-
it's around so it's like it's similar to, it falls into the power boost family. Really, that's what it falls into off this board. Meaning that it is an overdrive pedal that doesn't have an op amp in it, but it goes from clean to distortion. So it is a very primitive style. It's replacing the Superbolt is taking the idea of a valve amplifier, like a Supro,
yeah.
and replacing tubes with FETs.
Let's
That's
come back
what
to
FETs
that.
are good at. They're really good at that.
Let's come back and listen to that in a second. Let's listen to these then. So let's listen to these four,
Yep.
which have a very similar circuit design, right?
Okay.
Because
Which four?
With the blues breaker,
The RAT I wouldn't put in there, but I would say a Klon, a Bluesbreaker, and a TS9 aren't that crazy different as far as how they operate. Sonically, yeah, they're going to sound a little different, but they're soft clip. Well, this is hard clipping. These two are soft.
Let's
I'm
listen.
confusing myself.
Let's listen.
Yeah, soft clipping, TS9, and Bluesbreaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nick.
and just to make the point, this is actually Analog Man's Maxon TS808 mod
It has the boost in
It has the bad bulb
with the bad
boost
bulb in it. I think
built into the pedal. It's amazing.
that's killer.
All right, so
if we're
Nick.
confused, the descriptions will be below in the thing.
Right.
Right,
So
give me some love then, Dan, and we'll
All right.
I'll do some single coils and someone else can do some humbuckers in a sec.
ask
Can
you?
you turn it up, please?
Certainly.
Yeah.
Where do you, when you're getting your favourite tone from your tube screamer, how do you set it? How much overdrive do you blend in?
Kind of like this, maybe,
Okay.
and a bit more of that. All
So-
my pedals are sounding quiet today. I think it's because we're hearing the power boost. Just doesn't sound anything like it normally sounds like, and I can't quite work out why.
Okay.
Anyway,
Sounds really
okay,
good to
move
me.
on to the Klon. Let's do
Just
the
sorry,
Klon.
just 1 second then.
It's awkward when you guys yell at each other
Just-
in front of me.
Can you just play for me? Oh, because you're at the master set.
Ah, fuck. That's better.
Good.
Couldn't work out why it wasn't working properly, and it's because it was too quiet. Actually, the matchless wasn't really on. Okay, let's hear that with some humbuckers then. May as well start where we left off.
Oh,
No,
you go.
They're not that crazy different. It's funny because with this gain control down, you're not hearing really the hard clipping.
Yeah.
And it comes off very similar.
Yeah.
Because it's hitting the amps. It's making the same sound by hitting these amps really hard as these are making through soft clipping, which is the point of soft clipping.
Right.
That's why it sounds so similar.
See, I think there's a really interesting discussion there with everything we've just spoken about, everything you've heard, and there's not been a huge amount of playing today, but is all radically different the second you change the amps.
Oh yeah.
So
If you put a Princeton back here or something, it's like redo the whole show. It doesn't even.
and
Yeah.
It's wild.
it puts into perspective that whole I like this kind of pedal, because I like this kind of pedal means with this guitar and this amp, because it just radically changes everything.
Yeah.
But what you were saying about clipping is really interesting. So I know a lot of guys who use overdrive in their amp, for example.
Yeah. Like a 2-channel amp.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or even just an amp that they use, like whether it's a Vox or
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
something that's just overdriving a bit more.
Like a master volume amp or something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
those people tend, a massive generalization, but there's the thing I hear all the time is, I've tried loads of overdrive pedals and I just can't get with it because everything sounds smaller and squashy and not right. And I've always thought, well, if you use a pedal that's overdriving and clipping and then you stick it into something else that's overdriving and
Yes.
clipping really heavily, all you get is mush. So the preference in that world tends to be for
Boosters and
I absolutely agree. People like an AC-15 or any equivalent of like an EL-84 Vox style thing. If you're driving it, like your secret weapon overdrive is going to be a bad bob or some boost. I mean, it's going to be beautiful because you're not going to get a volume boost.
Yeah.
Your amp is low wattage. Back to headroom, you're going to have 15 watt ceiling. You're playing your guitar. The louder the signal gets, it's going to just clip more. You're not creating volume.
Yeah.
But the term boost really freaks everybody out. But actually, the boost into low wattage amps, that's the best overdrive.
yeah.
I don't want to say best. It's opinion. But it is the natural overdrive. It doesn't get any more. It's not best, but it's authentic. It's like the tube is actually overdriving.
Yeah.
It's really, when you think about the amplifier in that way, you've got you're overdriving into the input, which is overdriving the transformer, which is overdriving the speaker. There's so many different points
So
of
many the air moving the
yeah,
speaker.
yeah, it's amazing.
It's beautiful, yeah.
And it's also the least kind of one thing you can get into really quickly with overdrive pedals is if you're sat there in a store demoing it or even at home or wherever you're doing it, that lovely smooth controlled sound is the sound that's pleasing to your ear. And then I think the more you do it and dare I say the older you get, but the more you go through it, the more I think you start to train your ear, or your ear gets trained, I don't know which way around that goes, to things that just sound a little hairier and a little edgier and you learn to understand why that works and how it works.
And also, it's about context as well.
Totally.
If you're at home, you're playing these lovely, really smooth tones, and you're going to have a jam with someone, suddenly those smooth tones disappear because the edges aren't there.
Yes.
And when you think about the frequencies that are coming from just the drummer's hi-hats, and you want someone that's going to work with that.
Episode 8.
There you go.
Yeah.
If something sounds good outside of a band context, it probably sounds bad in a band context, which is hard with demos. It's really difficult.
Yeah.
It's really difficult because that's a rabbit hole. But it's like hearing guitars that you might not like, and then you hear it in a band context, and you're like, I want to sound like that instantly.
Oh,
it's crazy.
absolutely.
It's so mental.
Revelation with this guitar recently. So I'm going through a bit of trying to find a new Strat.
What is that?
It's the Macmull guys.
That's a cool headset.
And I like it. I really like it. Been trying a load of different guitars just recently, and then we did some band stuff in here.
Okay.
With bass player, we did bass show, and then we did some other stuff. And I hear that guitar in the mix, and it's like, and it's sat here. It's not like 100% the kind of thing that I normally like.
Right.
But in a mix, it's really sat there. So anyway,
It's like when you solo those like Brian May guitar tracks.
yeah.
Or, like it's just like your first instinct is like, is someone dying somewhere? And then you hear the track and it's perfect.
yeah.
It's
Did they
so
forget to
crazy.
put the bass pot up? Or,
Yeah.
And most mix engineers on a guitar track, they're going to instantly cut the low end totally out of the mix. Like they won't even listen to your track and they'll just hit the cut. It's wild.
Whole other subject. Okay. We'll sum up in a minute.
We haven't heard that.
I want to hear these two because
Yeah.
what we said was this is an FET booster and this is 3.
Yeah, it's stages. It's using transistors in a stage, like an amplifier, a guitar amplifier.
Yeah.
So instead of tubes, every tube section is replaced with a FET, and you trim those FETs to a certain voltage with a trim. You get the voltage perfect. You bias it, and it's like it's faking the sound of a tube amp in the closest way you can pull it off.
It's often said that FETs are the most tube-like.
Yeah,
sounding.
they're very
Yeah.
definitely.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
We can.
That's
we can
episode 9.
We can make that generalization, can we?
I think that's safe. Yeah, it's a very good part to do that with.
Okay.
There are no hard fast rules, but it's a
Daniel,
great part.
you're in the chair.
Yep.
Are you number 2?
I think I'm number 1.
Of course you are.
Am I? Yes, I am. Sorry. Let's do this quickly. All right, there
We have
go.
an hour left of this. I mean, those stages, even with it cranked, it's right on the edge of like a sagging rectifier tube thing. And the touch sensitivity is there because how much you give it is how much it distorts. So it feels very tube-like. The FET is great at that, back to what your comment was. So like if you have this, the harder you pick, you know, humbuckers are going to distort more. But if you back off, it's that buzzword is a real thing in certain circuits, touch sensitivity.
Yeah.
That's where these kind of circuits really thrive.
And does the switch mean 2 or 3
High gain,
FETs,
low gain.
or is it just more gain through?
High gain, low gain. Yeah, it's rebiasing the way they. It's just hotter. Yeah. Yep.
Oh,
Dude, Have-Go sounds amazing.
A little bit of a... Man's guitar sound.
I'm gonna say that's a big boy's guitar sound.
Big boy's guitar. You know all those things that we said you should never say.
You like Transistor
I
Overdrive?
really think I like better overdrives.
You might,
because everyone I've played recently, I've gone, yeah, that's.
There is a feel there that is very responsive. Like the way you play, you know, you're all over how you're approaching the notes and soft and hard and dynamic. There's a dynamic range to a Transistor Overdrive that's not going to be there with, say, not as much there as with something that maybe hard clips or so. It's true. That's just how the circuit works.
I really like
it's more tuned into your guitar than another style of overdrive. Doesn't make it better or worse, but if it's a certain player, like with me, I don't really, I mean, strummy, strum, you know, shoegate rock stuff. It's not that important. It's just not.
Yeah.
I think that's why everybody's different.
That's
like,
what it goes.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? Okay, so we've been going a long time. There's been a lot of information in this, and I suspect anyone who's stayed with us this long will have 2 reactions. One is, well, I've learnt a great deal, and another might be, oh my god, what the hell are they talking about? I can't understand a word of it. So let us try and summarise, shall we?
Okay.
What have you learned today, Dan?
I've learnt that I've got a MIG-50 on the way, and I'm as happy as can be.
From that point, he checked out.
Yeah.
No, I tell you what I've learned.
That's beautiful.
I've learnt that the Klon is a hard clipper, which I didn't realise.
Oh, I knew that. Yeah.
So, you know, I think the big takeaway, going through all this, yes, there are certain characteristics, like with the transistors thing. I love the power booster. You know, the Superbolt. I mean, there's definitely similarities between the two.
Yeah.
And that's and you can see it in the way it not just the way it sounds, but the way it feels to play. But the big thing for me is that each of these has a gain range, and each of these there'll be a spot that you like, maybe a few spots that you really like, but trying to cookie cutter them into certain things, it just certain categories, it doesn't work, and it reinforces everything that we talk about all the time. You've got to experience these things. You've got to sit down with your guitar and an amplifier that and plug these things in and see if you like them or not.
yeah. How on earth do you choose if you're out there scouring the internet,
Yeah.
looking at everything you make, everything Keeley makes, everything?
I mean, just behind us is like, it's insane. You
How
could
do
spend
you,
weeks in
How
here.
do you even
Yeah.
choose? And I think maybe it might be helpful to say that if you think about them as that kind of transistor, overdrives and fuzzes are one thing,
I like that, yeah.
and op-amp style overdrives that have clipping in are another.
Yeah.
That might even just get you to, well, I think I'm going to start there.
Yeah.
Or I think I'm going to
I
start
think that's
there.
the safest, like, sane thing to do.
Yeah.
Is, like, understand that better. Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
that they react with your amp very differently. Dan and I have made many videos about that. We don't need to go into that again.
Yeah.
Any further comments or observations, gentlemen?
I've loved this. I could sit here for hours.
We
and talk
will.
to you
When
about
the
this
camera
stuff.
goes off, we,
But it's fascinating. It's to get your insight on this. Someone who's
Yeah.
who is so involved in every aspect of the creation and your knowledge of this stuff. It's just been so great. Thank you so much for your time today, mate.
Thanks.
I've
been
had a blast.
It's been just wonderful. Really, really great.
This will make
really
a nice
great.
podcast too. Hello
love
to
it.
our podcast listeners.
Yes, hello, podcast listeners.
Yes.
I say
Okay.
as I look directly into the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They can see that. They
I
can
love
feel your eyes, Dan.
so I've been told. You looking at me? Right. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Massive thank you, specifically first to Josh, also to our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe is.
And this is music of Guildford, Surrey.
And in the UK, no, it's the other one, didn't I?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm all over
It's
the
the
place.
other United.
It's the other United. So we have the United States.
Riff City Guitar of New Hope, Minnesota, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota, North Dakota,
Yeah.
South Dakota.
one of the Dakotas. Just
Yeah.
say the Dakotas.
Thanks,
Is
Dakotas.
that all right?
And the Australia. Australia?
Pedal Empire of Brisbane, Queensland.
There we go.
Yeah.
Massive thank you to our patrons on Patreon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And of course, if you want to head over to thatpedalshowstore.com and check out our lovely wares.
And buy our single on iTunes.
Oh, we have a single on iTunes. It's actually two singles, but you buy them on one thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or you don't buy them separately. You buy
Yeah,
them as
they
one
wouldn't
thing.
let us call it an EP. iTunes refused to let us call it an EP.
It's really
anyway,
cool.
Search for That Pedal Show Band on iTunes. Go and hit his website up, JHS.
Yeah, jhspedals.com.
Pedals.com.
Instagram's great. Instagram, JHS Pedals, and then YouTube, the JHS Vlog.
You
Yeah.
need to check out
Yeah.
Josh's vlog.
It's-
It is
Superb.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Lots of stuff like this done more professionally and more succinctly.
I don't know about that. Differently.
So
This was a blast.
Josh has brought Nick along today, who does all of his editing and filming and stuff.
People think I do everything, which is awesome.
Right.
I just bask in the fact that I do everything. But yeah, Nick's here. So
Nick's been sat there watching us film for an hour and a half, going, "This would never work. This would never work." But no, it's been so great. Thank you so much.
I love it. I'm coming back.
Awesome, brilliant. Okay, guys, have a fantastic week, and we'll see you next week.
Cheerio.
Bye.